Hello everyone, my name is Wayne Hollingsworth and I'll be providing another DMM tutorial for you guys using Maya 2012. Let's get started. I have a structure here. I just quickly modeled. This is like more of a capsule or a teleportation device, so you could use your imagination when you decide to create objects to destroy. But it's pretty simple. It's low poly, it's clean, it's the transformations are frozen, there's no history on it. Um, And we have a base structure here. We have a This is going to be a glass structure, and then we have a top lid portion. And now I have a locator animated over the course of 30 frames, and we're going to be parenting a DMM object to trigger our destruction. So I have a few layers prepared. These are empty, but when I create these passive and density regions, I'm going to store them in my layers over here so I can just stay organized. So in previous lessons, I discussed several techniques on how to prefactor your geometry, but for this lesson, we're going to stick with the poly mesh with auto cage feature. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So once I hit that button, we begin to shatter our geometry. I'm going to pull up the DMM Asset Manager. I'm going to turn off the Driven Tap Mesh. Let's minimize that. And let's press play. So our object falls straight through the ground. We don't want that. We want to kind of pin these vertices here at the bottom. So what I'll do is I'll create a passive region. I'll scale it up. I'll slide it down. Put it in my layer here. And now when we press play, that's exactly what we get. So let's change the attributes here a bit. Let's open up our attribute editor and we see our default material. So let's assign a material that we think might work well for this. So let's use drywall. There we go. And now I'll take a look at the attributes again. And let's press play and see what that looks like. So it bounces around a bit if you notice. And we don't want that. We want it to have a little bit of flexibility, but I want it to be a little bit stiffer. And that's a lot better. So I'm happy with that. Now I'm curious to see how this object interacts with the ground. So I'm going to quickly create a sphere. A DMM sphere, that is. And I'm just going to V-snap it to the center of my locator. And I'm just going to scale it up till I think a size is pretty accurate. And that's pretty good. I'm happy with that. So now let's select our sphere again. And let's make that passive. So with this being passive, we can disregard the attributes here. It's not going to calculate these materials because it's passive, which is pretty cool. So now when we press play, we should get some type of interaction. But before we do that, let's select our locator, select our sphere, and let's constrain parent. So now when we press play, we get some nice interaction here. Let's see how they're tumbling and rolling and things like that. So let's create a DMM square here. Let's just scale that up. Make sure we cover a pretty decent distance. And on my side view here, turn my grid off. I'm just going to make sure that it's resting right underneath our ground. Perfect. And I lost my viewport there for a second. There we go. So we're back. I'm going to hide my passive region again. And the floor we can hide. And let's just put this on another layer and call this ground. And so we're not selecting it. Let's just template it. And let's take another look at our animation. And that's nice. Now, we still don't get interaction because the cube that we created, we have to remember to switch this to passive. And now, if we hide it again and press play, we should get some nice ground interaction with the pieces of shards. And there you go. So these chunks are way too big, and they're not flexible enough. So I kind of want them to bend a little bit more. So I'm going to reduce my stiffness, and that's a little bit better. So let's add a little bit more resolution to this portion here. I want to keep the big chunks down here, but I want to get some nice small bits in here. So I'm going to create a DMM density region. I'll scale that up. Scale that down in Y. Maybe reduce the overall scale a bit. And let's just slide it up. And feel free to test out different types of geometry with different variety when it comes to your density regions, and see what kind of cool stuff you can come up with. So my attribute editor, under the extra attributes, is going to be a density scale parameter, and let's just start adding zeros to that. And you'll notice immediately in our viewport our resolution is increasing just in that area. And as you can see, I'm just adding more zeros. And I think I'm happy with this amount of resolution. This might be a bit much, so I'm going to take this 10 here and just make that a 5. And there we go. I think that's more than enough now. So I'm going to take our density region, assign it to our layer, and hide it. So now our simulation is going to slow down, but it's going to still be relatively fast. So now we have some nice interaction. We have a few small pieces here. We have a medium-sized, big chunks. And you can see our structure is bending, but it's still holding its shape, which is nice. And then it starts to recursively shatter and break on itself, which is pretty nice. And this eventually, if we let the timeline go, it may just continue to crumble and then shatter again, which is kind of cool. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to rewind that, and now let's move to this glass structure here. And before I do so, I'm going to quickly save. I'm going to version up. And I have these scene files prepared for you guys to look along, to follow along, or start from scratch. So we just save now, which is a pretty common thing to do working with DMM. Try to save often. And now let's start to shatter this guy right here. Turn off the tap mesh. Let's assign a safety glass material. Let's take a look at our settings, and let's try to increase our toughness just a bit and see what happens. And I'm going to get out of my X-ray view just to see if this is going to pre-shatter before I want it to, and it's not, so that's good. But I kind of want to hold it in place, so I'm going to quickly create a passive region just to hold this top portion of our glass structure in place. We don't want it to move around or fall on the base structure to start the shattering. We kind of want to wait for our sphere to do that. So now I'll add it to the correct layer, and now you see what's happening. Because we've pinned it, it's starting to shatter on itself. So we're going to have to tweak our parameters a little bit more. So I'm going to increase my stiffness, and I'm going to increase my toughness, and see if that helps. And it's almost there, so I'm going to keep bringing my toughness up, and there we go. That's a lot better. And then we get some shattering, which is cool. So now the problem is, and we can turn off our wireframe because we know our glass is behaving correctly. It's still pinned, so we're going to have to two things. You could either not pin your object and have your settings really high and animate your settings. But instead of animating my settings, I'm going to animate this passive region here. So as soon as it gets to frame, let's take a look here. Maybe frame 9 is the frame that I want, or even 8. Frame 8, I'm going to key this here, and then 2 frames in, let's literally just slide it over and up, just to ensure that no pieces of geometry get in the way. And let's key that again. So now let's take a look. So that's cool. So I think I kind of like the structure and how it's behaving, but I'm not happy with this base here. So I think I'm going to increase this uh, st stiffness on the base here just a bit more. And what I'll do now is I'm going to pause the video and do a quick play blast, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. So we have our play blast here, and let's take a look. So we get some nice interaction. We see our main structure holds this shape. Our safety glass is behaving like safety glass, which is nice. We have little chunks here, but then we have big chunks that stick together. And we might need to go in and have to increase our sub steps to smooth out some of our behavior. Because right now it's set to 8, so we probably want to raise that to 64 at render time, or when you're ready to cache, so you can get a more accurate result. But for right now, we can get away with 8. That's pretty cool. I'm happy with it. So one last step we need to do, we need to shatter our top lid portion here. We'll create a cache, and we'll be all ready to go. So let's go ahead and do that now. I'm going to select my object here. I'm going to create a nodal cage. I'll open up the DMM Asset Manager once again. Turn off the Driven Tet Mesh. And let's add a material. Let's add not a rubber, but maybe let's do a hard rubber. And I'm going to open up my material editor here, and I'm going to crank my stiffness, and I'm going to crank my toughness just a bit. I'm just curious to see how it behaves. I rarely ever leave a material at default. I always adjust it. I either would add to the settings or reduce some of the parameters, but once you get familiar with the material library, you'll find yourself constantly editing what's provided for you. So now I'm going to rewind and play. And as you can see, our lid is still kind of cohesively stuck to our glass. And let's discover that. I'm just curious to see why that's happening. I think it may be because of the positioning of our object. I kind of like that, because it shows me that there's something here that's physically bonding this together, which is pretty neat. But let's play it through and see what happens if this portion here hits the ground and shatters again. I'm just curious to see, because that would be pretty neat if that does that. And I'll stop it, and I'm just going to get a better position and play the sim. And as you notice, it's very stiff. It's not shattering, but it is still pretty neat. But I'm going to change a few parameters, and I'm going to take my stiffness down a bit, take my toughness down, and I'm going to turn on my sphere, because I want to make sure it's actually making contact, and I may need to move it over just a tad, and that's the problem. I think it's missing. So let's kind of bring it over just, oops, not your sphere but your locator, just slide that over just a bit, and let's key that. all we want to see is some type of contact. And let's see if that does that for us. And we do get contact. Great. That's all I want. Now we have a few chunks. And I'll stop this here for you guys. We have a few chunks that break. And I'm even going to now, because I thought that it was my parameters, I'm going to try to get it back to where it was. So I'm going to increase my stiffness again and increase my toughness. And I'm going to quickly save. And I'm going to press play again and see what we get. And I'm happy with that. I'm pretty satisfied. I'm not going to take this any further. I will probably just do one more thing, and that is um, maybe decreasing our toughness and maybe decreasing our. What I'll do is I'll decrease our stiffness so we can get more of a rubbery feel, but then I'll increase our toughness just a bit. And let's take one more look. And I think that's a little bit better because now what I'm seeing, um, let's wait for this to stop. Great. So we have, it's breaking, but it's kind of giving us a nice shape here, and it's only breaking into three pieces. It may break again when it hits the ground, but for right now, I kind of want it to kind of tear apart, and that's exactly what's happening. So I'm happy with that, and what I'll do now is I'll select all these guys. You all you need to do is select one actually. Uh, Open up your C node, select DMM object node, and here is your cache. So I'm just gonna on the side here browse uh, to a directory, and I'll paste it, and I'll it'll create a folder for us, and let's now activate that, and let's rewind and play. And I'm gonna play it through while you guys are here. I won't pause the video. Actually, you know what? I will pause the video, and when this cache is complete, I'll also run a play blast, so I'll have that for you guys, and I'll conclude. So I'll be right back. Welcome back. So let's take a look at our play blast and see what we can improve on. I kind of like how the rubber is behaving, how it kind of bounces around. The safety glass bends and it contracts as it hits the floor, but yet uh, some of it recursively shatters, which is nice. The base continues to hold its structure because of our passive object we have there. So overall, this is a pretty successful simulation. All you would need to do now is add debris and particle instancing and some fluids or some sprites, and you have a pretty cool looking test. And we can scroll through the timeline and see that our sim is cached and our scene is giving us very fast feedback. So if I select a DMM object, open up the C node, and now if you notice my substeps is 32. By default it's set to 8. I probably could go higher, maybe 64 or even maybe 96 or 128. Keep in mind your simulation time will take longer, but um, if you're at a final step and it's taking maybe a minute or a minute and a half to calculate a frame, and you have maybe 90 frames, it's definitely worth it because your simulation is going to be very accurate. Right now you can see there's some things that are lacking, but it's just a work in progress. But for this lesson, I'm pretty happy with our results. So I'm going to conclude right here, guys, and I hope everyone here picked up a few pointers and tips. And feel free to dive in and just come up with your own simulations, mix and match your different materials that you have, and don't be afraid to try to push DMM to its limits. It's a very fast and intuitive software, and I think it's great for trying to achieve effects like this. Thanks for your time, and tune in for the next tutorial. Take care.